let's talk a little bit more about the practicalities of prayer. How do we kind of recognize these hard issues, these obstacles, and kind of move into some of the practical outworkings as well? And there are practical obstacles to prayer. We may have put a number of obstacles in our way, or have had obstacles put in our way by others that really make it difficult to find a place of prayer and do that in a consistent way. So one of those things are just our daily habits. When we wake up, what we do when we wake up, when we go to work, what do we accomplish? How do we go about our daily work in a way that's glorifying to the Lord? What are those habits at work that interfere with that? When we come home at night, have we burned ourselves out so bad at work that when we come home we have no energy for our families, and then ultimately to wind down and to go into prayer? Are we spending too much time in front of the television? The reality is that the average person watches about 4 hours of TV a day, and being programmed by someone else into a worldview that is contrary to the gospel can have a huge effect on our ability to enter into prayer. So those are just some of the habits that might be interfering with your life of prayer, and it's important to recognize what those are and to be able to take steps to mitigate against those or eliminate them. So let's just talk about some of the ways that we could do that. Some of those things could be very simple, and I think when I think about my own prayer life, being able to start small and to know that that's okay has really helped me a lot to establish a rhythm of prayer, a daily rhythm, a weekly rhythm. And some of those things might just be a prayer of thanksgiving with your family around the dinner table, and I would not minimize the importance of that. I think some people could maybe trivialize that and just treat that as obligatory or just something that you're supposed to do. But kind of reclaim that time around the table to genuinely give thanks, even ask everybody at the table to just say one thing that they're thankful for, and to be able to lift those up to the Lord in genuine thanksgiving for what He's done. Prayer at certain times of the day. Johnny alluded to this in talking about consistency in prayer, that it's okay to set an alarm or to put Post-its around your house to remind you to come into that place of prayer. Even set an alarm. And even if it only turns into a few seconds of prayer at those specific times of the day, that's okay, right? It's prayer. You're praying instead of not praying. And so in that sense, you can look at success in prayer as very binary. You're either doing it or you're not. And so fortunately, it's really easy to turn that corner from not praying into praying simply through setting alarms. Maybe for morning, midday, and evening could be a good place to start. And one of the most important things that I think tends to get overlooked in our culture, I know gets overlooked in our culture, is a day of rest. And at JVC, we really value the Sabbath and a day of rest and refer to it as the Lord's Day, that it's important to take that time to rest, to recreate, to be rejuvenated, and to find time in that day to have maybe some extended times of prayer. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So as we can establish some of these habits, then we can think a little bit more in terms of structure. Some people are able to just launch into incredible times of spontaneous prayer, and that's just kind of the character of their prayer life. That's not me. And for a lot of people that I know, that's just not how it is. That there is a discipline to prayer, there's a rhythm to prayer that needs to be maintained in order for it to be consistent. And in order for it, again, to line up with God's will and His desire for our lives and our lives in prayer. So one of the things that's been really helpful for me is to use a template, which is the ACTS format, ACTS, which is simply adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication, which is something that I've employed. I have a little prayer card that has one section for adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. It's a very simple list. It doesn't take me long to get through, but really does provide me a mechanism to lead me through these fundamental aspects of prayer and provide me some consistency to know, one, that I'm doing it, and two, that I'm kind of covering my bases, which really has provided some richness in my prayer life. So that's something to think through. Another thing is a rhythm of prayer, thinking about it in terms of music. That music is kind of a structured, has a structured format. There's notation, there's time signatures, there's all these things that music has, but once you learn the fundamentals of music, it's easier to improvise. It's easier to come together with others and engage in spontaneous prayer or enter into other people's structures and be able to be comfortable there. So if we can think about it in that way with a particular prayer time, maybe I take this card and I spend 5 minutes on each and I set a timer for each one of those things. And that has been helpful for me in the past. I'd say another thing that maybe is lost on us is this idea of kind of some rituals around prayer. Like maybe it's preparing a cup of prayer tea, right? Where you're going to be going into a time of prayer, and part of that ritual is to prepare yourself a nice cup of tea, right? And that's your prayer tea. You're going to take that into your place of prayer, and you're going to sip it slowly and make that part of your time of prayer, right? Maybe it's a special chair. You have a prayer chair, and that's the chair that you sit in when you pray. And you take your cup of tea and you sit down in your chair, and it just helps to guide your mind and your heart into knowing that you're going into this place. A prayer walk, having a path that you walk, maybe in your neighborhood. For me, I go down by the river since it's not too far from my house, and I walk that path, and I've had some really great times of prayer there. And maybe it's something as simple as a prayer journal, being able to just jot down bits of thanksgiving, seeing how the Lord has answered prayer, and being able to even go back and reflect on those things. I've looked at things I've written several years ago and have kind of been able to remember where I was at that time, what I was praying, how was I praying at that time, how have I grown, how have I maybe regressed and forgotten, and those things can be powerful as we continue to journal. Another big obstacle is our busyness, especially in our country. It's a badge of honor to be busy, and oftentimes we're just busy for busyness sake. And so it is time to take time to intentionally stop and rest and recreate. Again, coming back to the Lord's Day, that we are able to set aside some time, and even daily, to make sure that we have a little bit of time to rest and to recreate and to just stop our busyness. Another big issue along with busyness is just other distractions. And I think for me, when I'm going into that place of prayer, or I need to, or I haven't, it's usually because I've been distracted. I've allowed myself to enter into this place of busyness, and to be able to set aside those things that distract. And here I have 5 F's and a P. You might be able to guess what the P is, but family, friends, fun, fitness, and finances, and then your phone. Each of these things is great in their own time, but a lot of times we'll substitute or take away from our time of prayer to engage with other people, or just in something that's more fun, or even taking care of our bodies. But most definitely, the phone can be a huge distraction. And, I remember going to the doctor's office a few months ago, and there were probably 20 people in the waiting room. And I sat down, and everybody, even the children, were on a device. And I knew that happens. I know that does happen. But that was a little bit disturbing to me, that time that used to be people interacting with one another, a time maybe of just reflection, a time of prayer for news that's going to be given in the doctor's office that day when you're there, that just gets lost in a screen, and which is really unfortunate. And we'll part with this, which is Jesus gives some very clear instruction about what prayer looks like, again, in the Lord's Prayer and in the prelude up to it. And he says, when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray. But there is this importance of wherever you go, it should be a private place, and it should be a quiet place where you can focus, where these other distractions are not present, where when you shut that door or you get down by the river, you know that you're not going to be distracted by any of these other things, the 5 F's and the P. Maybe you have a Bible passage that you memorize that you can use as an opening prayer and recite it. Maybe in a kneeling position, you enter into your place of prayer, you take this passage, you recite it on your knees, just to kind of have this regular entrance into this place of prayer where you take a posture before the Lord that's submissive, that's worshipful and reverent, and be able to have a passage that can help stir your heart and steer it in that direction. And for me, I take my cup of coffee in and I drink it slowly, and it just is part of my rhythm of kind of entering into that time of prayer. It helps me to center a little bit. It's usually in the morning for me, so something as simple as that can be part of a prayer ritual. Not that you want your whole prayer life to just be some ritual, but it's more of, think about it in terms of rhythm, right? It's kind of this, it's a habit. It's developing a path for yourself to enter into prayer on a consistent basis. So these are just some of the things that have been really helpful for me. I've seen these things be helpful for others, and some of them the Lord has just taught us how to pray, and we can be very thankful that He did not leave that out of His Word, that He knows that questions about prayer were going to be common, and so He was able to address those and give us a very solid template for what it looks like to pray. And ultimately, the Lord loves you and wants to hear from you. You are His beloved child.